Awesome. Thank you for joining us today. Wherever you're at, we're going to be talking about support. I think it's pretty cool having two sisters because what better people to support each other in life? But we've both got our journeys on support. So this is going to be a good question. It actually follows on from our last podcast where we were talking about, we got right into the whole scenario of feeding and parenthood. And so today we're just going to talk about what is support. And also I think what we're just discussing is that sometimes we don't feel supported, but we actually are supported. So it actually is quite different for everybody. And also I think a lot of it is to tie in with how you're actually feeling with yourself if you're actually able to receive the support. So often there actually is support around us, but actually what's happening on our internal world, our internal dialogue, actually can create us to not be supported because we feel internally unsupported, even though there is avenues out there. So let's dive into this conversation. Yeah, so Sarah, you're just having a good topic about, you're quite passionate about this support.
Yeah, it's been a topic of interest to me, having worked in an industry of supporting individuals through like healing their bodies. It does come down to people are seeking support to do that, but everyone, and everyone sort of like would you say perfect recipe of support is like their pathway to healing.
Yeah.
And everyone has such a different mix of that, and there's just so many different factors that impact what kind of support people truly need. Quite often we don't actually know what support we need, but we know we want to feel supported, and it's kind of working out like what is that, like what is, and when you ask yourself and even other people. I had this conversation, I've had this interesting journey around support. So I've been seeking support my whole life.
I know, that's how it feels, isn't it? Like it's like this thing that we're trying to get to. Yeah,
this is like a human experience.
Do you tie support in with a sense of belonging? You know how each of us have a unique, every human being has a sense to belong. And I think support and belonging actually come hand in hand. If you don't feel like you belong, you can't receive support because you don't feel worthy of the support if you don't have a belonging, if that makes sense.
I definitely feel like that's a huge part of it. I feel like it is about a sense of feeling whole.
Yeah.
A sense of oneness, a sense of togetherness, clarity, direction.
Yeah, like it's.
Yeah, and community. Like there's what has brought us together, the glue of like what we're doing right now. We are seeking to support others and working out what that is, and where we'll fumble a little bit in doing that, because it's such a it's abstract concept, support, when we're talking about it. And when we're trying to, make it logical, because really it's not something that we can kind of read about, and we can, make notes of like, what does support, what supports us? There's so many different things that support us, our lifestyle, the community around us. There's lots of things that can support us, but we can have all these things.
External thing, eh?
Sorry, sweetheart, what was that?
Often with the support, where we can start thinking quite logically on the external, and we forget about that internal support.
Yeah.
Often we're like, we just need more people around us. We just need to be doing this, and then it's going to be fine. But I think for our journeys, we've realised we definitely need those community, but it's actually that internal support and feeling strong within ourselves actually grounds you to be able to belong, to be able to let yourself be in community. So often we're trying to do it backwards, aren't we? We're trying to belong before we're trying to do the behaviour before we actually feel like we can belong. Yeah.
And that's a vital step, but there's an integration process that I think that a lot of us are missing. And it's what, you know, you touched on that, like we look for that externally, but we're not accessing it internally. We can't really access it properly externally either if we haven't got that internal connection. What it boils down to in my own experience is actually having to foster the feeling, like the felt sense of support. And the more I foster that felt sense of support, I'm talking about physically, that's what, you know, if I was to link it back to what my Pilates, my movement practice really is a sensory experience of actually feeling like I'm supporting my body. I like to use movement like a full body hug, so working around the body and actually just feeling held, like feeling held by the surfaces, and through that practice. And you can link it back to other mindfulness practices, like this is the same kind of like like chemistry or dynamic of like what grounding would do for us, the other kind of health benefits of things like breathing, and, you know, like deep touch. We're also being present. This is linking in on a different way of like, why do these like mindfulness practices help us, is because we feel supported when we're doing them. We can actually feel how we're held, and that's what it's kind of about. Does that make sense? Like feeling held.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I think I've got quite a racy mind. And so my mind is going, and I find the only way to still my mind is to come and do some Pilates, is actually to bring myself back into myself. Otherwise, I feel like I'm all over around here. And then when I stop and get on my mat, I think that's what really changed for me from going to the gym and doing lots of high intensity group classes. I was still getting too much stimulation. I was still up here. So I wasn't actually connecting in my body because I'm too busy seeing what everyone else is doing, whatever else is going on. But coming and doing Pilates, I think for me, it's just such a beautiful time for my own self-love and self-care, is that when I'm on the mat, I can be like, whoa, I actually am feeling really tight here. Why is that? How can let's zoom in on that space and breathe into that and feel that release. And so that's what I think that's where I've found more, I guess we're not doing it for results, but I think I've found more connection in my body. I'm actually connecting the muscles more efficiently because I'm stopping and being mindful, and I'm not just throwing myself around. I'm actually being aware of how things are moving, how they feel when they're moving. And I love talking to you one time. I remember saying, I love Pilates. It's actually made me feel a lot more supported in my hips. And I think for a lot of us women, we can feel quite unsupported in that hip area. I still have quite a tight hip on one side. And I love how we kind of, once we had that conversation and you were saying to me that often we hold a lot of our tension, a lot of can be trauma in our spaces. And I think a lot of us aren't aware that our bodies, yes, we might have mentally processed and maybe heart processed a trauma, but it's actually still in our body. And I think that's a really untapped area where we don't realize that part needs a little love and support. And how to do that in a safe place without becoming a total, I don't know, sometimes it's scary because you're like, if I go there to that very vulnerable state, am I going to get out? I think that's where a lot of some people I talk to about trauma and going through things, it's quite scary to address it, and especially within our body. So I've noticed in class, I'm not sure about you in group fitness, I've noticed when I've taught Pilates in a group, there's suddenly some women crying when you're trying to get them to connect with their pelvic floor, because it's a really an area where they don't want to put some love in because they don't feel supported, they don't feel womanly, they don't feel beautiful, you know, whatever that is for them, they feel really insecure, so they don't feel supported in that area, and it brings a lot of emotions out. And I think for us, we really want to love women through this journey of actually supporting them, like, hey, it's actually okay if you break down and cry. Like for me, that's like, yay, like, yay, this is actually what your body's bringing attention. And I think our body brings attention to things. I'm a true believer that if something like that comes up, I'm actually in a space to process and deal with that. Like things,
Yeah,
I feel like things come up when you, for me, I believe in Jesus, I believe in God. I think he's saying to me, okay, Ally, you're strong enough. You can actually work through this, even though I might not think I am, but it's like, okay, this is actually coming up right now for a reason. Because I believe that this is the time for you to process through that. So we really want to, and we've supported each other through that. That's what we've done for each other these last couple of years. We went through the trauma of losing our mum together, and I think that really bonded us going through that trauma, because it was very different for both of us. And I really found having someone to talk to and process through that, because who knows, grief is a journey. It's not, there's no process to this. Our whole lives are a journey, and I think having the support, a lot of us feel like, we're constantly searching for something that's unattainable. That's how I kind of feel with something.
Or external to us. And the trauma, I just want to speak a little bit more from like a physiological, kind of biological view of that trauma being held in the body, is that when we experience things, as just to simplify it and to tie it kind of back into that sensory sense of being supported, we experience everything in our life through our senses. Our senses are like basically our feedback to our nervous system, and it conditions our nervous system how to respond. So a lot of that conditioning, like preset, like autopilot conditioning, was set before, like in our earlier years. So like, you know, in those first 8 years in particular, you know, you will have like other traumatic events that kind of condition us into a certain way, you know, to respond in a certain way automatically. But you might find, you know, I resonate with this, and I know that Ally does, and anyone who's listening, you might find that you get yourself into these patterns where someone does something, you know, logically that, or the situation, you know, logically that it's not a big deal, but you feel in your body it's such a big deal, and you're so emotional to it, and you're like, oh my gosh, my emotions don't match the situation. What's going on here? It's actually not you. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. What's happening is that your autonomic nervous system, you know, automatic nervous system is conditioned to go, oh, this is a bad situation. When this dynamic happens, this doesn't make, oh, I don't feel safe here. So your body doesn't feel safe. And that's why you have those big emotions.
Like fright, kind of emotions.
Yeah. And even if you had like later on, like what Ally touched on, like losing our mum, like having that brought up when we have a traumatic experience or something that kind of is quite meaningful for us, we make meaning to it, that's another kind of topic in itself. We might have like sadness come up, and then we attach this other experience to it. So it kind of becomes a compounding effect. So again, that kind of like, oh, what I feel in my body is not happening right now, or like I can feel like grief. Like that's such a good example of like we can feel like these intense emotions like way after the fact, and like nothing could be happening really, you know, in a situation right now that warrants that sense of feeling, but it can stay with us for such a long time, because like we can associate a flower with that time, you know, like, oh, when we felt sad one time, when we felt really, really sad, it was a beautiful day, we went outside and we were so sad, you know, and our senses took in that. Like it's crazy how much like association we have. Like we are this magnificent machine, you know, like our biology. So it's being understanding is like, oh, okay, our biology can kind of get a little bit confused about these sorts of things, and having these practices that kind of reassure us that we're safe, we can kind of condition our body back to being like, oh, okay, the wind's not blowing, our car alarm's not going to just blow off like while it's windy. We're able to actually kind of identify and orientate ourselves to the present moment. So when that is actually happening, I feel like for most of us, and you know, I used to actually call myself or identify as someone who was emotionally unstable. I'm not. Like I had a very faulty car alarm, like nervous system, and I was, you know, very emotional. I'm still emotional, but I love that about me. I love it.
Personalities, you know, like that's how we have to embrace each other's differences and recognize that we're actually quite different, you and me. I can be I can be a bit more stuff it all in and not really connect with my emotions, which is not healthy either. So I have
and I'll cry for you. I'll be like,
I have to be mindful of that, because and then people are crying for me and I'm like, it's okay, and I'm comforting them. So I've had to actually be really present with myself and be raw with myself, like, okay, I can feel anxiety rising. I don't know what's going on, so I need to check in with my emotions. They're there somewhere. And that's the beauty of stopping and taking that time and having, as you know, that warming up of our body and breath and all that can be so beautiful. So I think something that all of us would probably be able to connect with, what you were talking about before, how we attach situations, our senses can attach things. This is where comfort eating comes in, isn't it? Because, you know,
100%,
yeah, so I think of most women, I don't know about you guys, but we can all probably put our hands up and say, guilty as charged. Give me a block of chocolate.
It can be so subtle, right?
Yeah.
It can be so subtle.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more about what you're saying. These little kind of I just want to insert here that these bad habits that we have, they're not actually bad. They're strategies that have worked very well for us to a short time. We've been very poorly resourced for coping with like situations, or they're our attempts, they're our survival attempts to regulate our nervous system. So they're not a bad habit. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not doing something wrong. It's like recognizing, oh, okay, I've got this autonomic, like an autopilot response, and this is how my body just automatically responds when it's stressed. And that's you know, it just doesn't have the resourcing for it. And because this would have been conditioned like in your earlier years, it just is so hard to kind of, you know, reprogram that. And it'll probably come back in all the time. Like, just because you've worked at it all your life, there's not actually, those are kind of set. I just want to say that these are kind of your survival strategies. And when you feel like, then there'll be thriving strategies. So it's like being able to slow down enough to be able to, you know, stop, you know, or recognize like, oh, okay, this is interesting. I'm kind of like eating mindlessly right now. I can choose to keep on doing that, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, is this good for me now and later? Might not be good for me later. So choices that are kind of good for us now and good for us later, but we'll go on that, but, you know, I've kind of gone off topic, I feel like, but.
I think this actually does tie into support though, because I think a lot of us, especially when we go down the track of comfort eating and stuff like that, you're right. We're like, naughty me, punish. Send me into the bad corner. I need to be a better person. I need to have stronger willpower. And then we're like, okay, I don't have strong willpower. I need people to support me because my willpower sucks right now.
Totally, yes.
And then I think then we actually dig ourselves into a hole because we feel like we're failing and we feel like we don't deserve friendships. Like, we can go pretty negative and pretty toxic pretty quick. I think that, as you're right, we haven't been given good coping strategies. And what served us as children doesn't necessarily serve us as adults. So my coping mechanism as a child, I lived in a very fantasy world. I kind of turned everything positive. That hasn't served me as an adult because I can't escape. You know, like, I have responsibilities now. I can't live in fantasy land. I can't. I'm pretty good at putting a positive spin on everything, but then sometimes I have to. You know, we had a conversation yesterday. Sometimes I have to actually stop and be like, actually, I'm putting a positive spin on something that's not actually working for me. And everyone thinks I'm okay. So then you don't get the support because I can put out there that I'm pretty doing okay. I can be a pretty self-sufficient person, but who knows, all our deep core needs is for relationships. And my kids are like, why are you talking to the neighbors so much, Mum? I'm like, because I need adult interaction. I need to have community. I need to talk. And I think most of us, we can get so tied up in, especially if you're a parent, we can get so tied up in that bubble of our family and trying to be everything and be the support for our family. We forget that for us to successfully support our family, first and foremost, we need that support. We need to carve out that time for us. It's not selfish. A lot of mums, I say, number one on your to-do list a day is actually you. You shouldn't be on the bottom of your to-do list.
Yeah.
You should be number one priority is actually mama needs her self-care. She needs to feel good. She needs to fill her tank so she can give out. And I think often our kids are like, like you should just do everything and be everything for me, and that's okay. But I think taking that time out, showing our children that, hey, I actually have value and worth, and I need to do this for me, actually helps install value and worth when they're older, because they're going to learn it is actually healthy practices to look and love after my body.
100%. I'm so glad that you tied it into that, because that's...
We're brought up, I mean, I love my mum. My mum's amazing. Once again, we're coming from broken generation to broken generation, and it's starting to snowball. Everyone says, why is this generation so full of anxiety? It is snowballing through the generations. And we didn't get brought up with healthy eating lifestyles. We didn't get brought up with having a good, healthy relationship with food. And it's been a battle, a struggle for us to actually lose that control over that and have that healthy relationship. And it ties into everything.
And it wasn't like, it was polarizing is the experience. So there was like a lot of emphasis on healthy food, but there was like that very polarizing swing and of the unhealthy relationship with that.
And I think that's the same with support for us parents. I don't know about you, but all the time I want my kids with good friends. I want my kids to be socializing, have other adults around and supporting them. So I'm trying to create that for my children. And then they're like, you don't have any friends. Like my 13-year-old's like, I'm your best friend. I'm like, mummy needs adults friends too. So,
and I want to pop like another kind of spin, and this might kind of throw a spanner in the works as well. As much as it's important, I think it's good to hold a space for ourselves though as well. That when we don't feel supported, that's also supporting us in some way. Like, because there's something that's showing up for us that some dynamic in our life isn't working, and it's giving us the opportunity to change. Because if we, and as part of the human experience, if everything was going perfectly, I know that sounds amazing, it would be boring. But that I'm just being a little bit of the devil's advocate there. But
oh no, I agree with you. I think that's why it's important to constantly have those check-ins with yourself. Like quite often I will review my week and be like, okay, what went well last week? What didn't? What can I kind of change this week to improve on it? But you're right. Everything's, I think often we're looking for that
what's wrong
ideology of what we see on TV, some fantasy. Well, that's not reality. And that's why I think we have to as you say, we have to actually rethink, what does the word support actually mean to me? In the season I'm in.
Oh my gosh, that's and it's the meaning. I just love that so much. I feel like we could probably wrap this up a little bit now, as in the meaning we give to it is our experience of it. So if we want to feel like, enveloped in like delicious kind of support, is that we give that kind of meaning to it, and we're seeking that kind of relationship with it. That's not conditional to having to that be associated with someone else. So if I, as much as I love, like as in, if I was seeking always support, and I only see, I'm not saying not to get it from people, but if the only way that I channeled support was from you and was from my husband, right? That's very conditional, as in like the stars have to align in the perfect way all the time, and the condition has to happen, and you have to be on call when I need you. Do you mean like that? That's setting myself up to have a very unhappy experience with support. Because that's actually putting it outside of me. That's putting the responsibility of support outside of me always. Versus spending more time in, and we will talk about this more, I think, on another podcast, in terms of like building a relationship with ourselves is building a relationship with our own kind of spiritual, practice of something, having something that's always tangible. So not tangible, but like something that's always greater than us and that can always support us, is finding the things that, what is the things that are always going to be a constant support for you, and creating stability in our life, a sense of stability. Again, we come back to the Pilates of like, how do we feel more stable in our life, more supported? And those are just, the more you feel it with the practice, the more you feel it, the more you experience it, and you're likely to kind of draw it in.
Good, hey? Like, it becomes a kind of, for me, it's become a necessary part of my life because I need it right now in the season I'm in. And it's something I look forward to each day. It's kind of like my, yay, this is some time for me. And even some mornings where I wake up and I feel like, meh, but then I'm like, I know how good I feel afterwards. I just know how much better I feel within myself. And that I'm ready for the day. And that's what I love about it. It actually can refresh me in so many different ways. But I really love this conversation. I think this is a conversation I really encourage you out there too. Over the next couple of days, start thinking like, hey, what is currently the support I'm receiving or giving? And what does it actually look like to me? How does that feel for me? What else can I do? Because not like, I don't want to make it like, kind of thing. Sometimes when people tell you to do something, but I just really encourage you to have a look in your own life to see if you're feeling unsupported, how are you feeling within yourself? I guess that's a good question. Is that, so I'm trying to frame a question, because often I can feel that I'm not getting external support, but I can create an internal support. And then often when I create that internal support, I can actually receive the external support. Yeah, because
I think we could probably even make this like talking more about what is internal support. I feel like we could definitely make that another conversation.
Yeah.
But in summary, it's, for me, how I've developed that is being like, how can I be the best parent to myself? If I was, because we're parents now, if I was to parent little Sarah, what does she need right now? And that's been really helpful to teach me, like, what that dynamic looks like or feels like.
Yeah, that's so good. I love it.
Love you.
Love you too. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to speaking again. Make sure you flick us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Love your feedback. And hey, we're here. And if there's a conversation you want to have, let's have it. Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Love you.